So SNC Lavalin is a Montreal-based company, and its description is it provides engineering, procurement, and construction services. It has a lot of employees in the Montreal area and has won a lot of major taxpayer-funded, like big, multi-million-dollar contracts from the federal government. So there's a lot of votes at stake, and there's a lot of profit at stake here. So what's happened was in 2015, the RCMP laid charges against this company, and the charges were they had alleged that the company offered bribes worth $47.7 million to Libyan officials, and Muammar Gaddafi's son was named in the court documents, I believe. The company is also alleged to have defrauded Libyan public agencies of approximately $129 million. And recently we found out that the RCMP has laid out a bribery scheme here in Canada with the company involving the $127 million Jacques Cartier bridge contract, of which a federal official pleaded guilty to last year in accepting more than $2.3 million worth of payments from this company. Like, what's the cost of doing business here? Like, the RCMP in 2015 used this quote. They said the charges, the corruption of foreign officials undermine good governance and sustainable economic development. This is a huge deal. Fast forward to this year. The company, this very wealthy, well-funded company, went on the lobbying spree to end all lobbying spree. Like, imagine American-style lobbyists, like full court press on the government, on everybody, meeting after meeting with the Prime Minister's office. Won't take no for an answer because they wanted to get out of this. That's the motivation here. And why? Because if they're convicted of this, this company can't bid on what? Federal contracts. That's the big penalty for this, right? There's a lot at stake. So in the budget bill, Mr. Speaker, this company, after lobbying, the Liberals snuck in something called a deferred prosecution agreement. In this like bajillion-page document that had everything under the sun, they snuck in a major legal change. And a deferred prosecution agreement, sort of simply put, would allow the government, or would allow SNC Lavalin not to have, if they went this route, to potentially not have to go to jail or be convicted. They could just pay a fine. And then they would also be eligible to what? Bid on federal contracts. So this is all happening behind closed doors. This gets snuck into an omnibus budget bill. The bill passes, but we have something called the Public Prosecutor Office in Canada, which is arm's length, and they're the ones who make the call on whether or not they use this deferred prosecution agreement. The public prosecutor said, nope, we're not doing this, we're going to trial. Then the Attorney General, the former Attorney General, held firm on that decision and said, yep, we're going to trial. Then, according to the clerk of the Privy Council office in testimony last week, after the Prime Minister's story on this issue has changed a million times, said the following: we went to the former Attorney General, this is essentially what he said, and we laid out the economic implications of what would happen if this went to trial and there was a conviction. This happened after she had made her decision to proceed. What we are talking about here is the Prime Minister's office and the supposedly nonpartisan public service, the head of the public service, essentially being involved or standing accused of being involved in an obstruction of justice at the highest levels. And that is why the Prime Minister needs to testify in front of Canadians. Let me lay out 5 reasons why this is so important. First of all, we need to find out, because what is accused here, and keep in mind, for those who are watching, the former Attorney General stood her ground after all of this, and then what? She was fired. Prime Minister fired her. Okay? So first of all, this is a potential obstruction of justice. This isn't just an ethics breach. This isn't just an Arakan Island slap on the wrist situation. There could be potentially serious criminality involved in this, number one. Number two, what message does this send? It sends a message to everybody in this country that there are two sets of rules, that there's two different justice systems in this country. In Canada, one for people who can afford millions of dollars of lobbyists and can put pressure based on ridings in Montreal, and one for racialized communities. Women who don't have that opportunity, who, we can sit here and talk about all sorts of ways to deal with that issue, but I mean, that is the reality here. There are many people in Canada that do not get this opportunity. So that's a huge problem. The third thing is that the Prime Minister, oh, Mr. Feminist, oh, he's such a feminist, he's standing up for women. The clerk of the Privy Council stood in our Justice Committee last week and said, basically, well, I think she experienced things differently when she was trying to determine whether or not, or explain whether or not this was quote-unquote inappropriate pressure that could be criminal. Where did we hear that before? Prime Minister had a groping allegation. He used the exact same words. She should have experienced it differently. Come on. This isn't he said, she said, as Maclean's magazine said. This is he said. He's a fake feminist. This Prime Minister is somebody who wraps feminism around him like a warm, fuzzy cloak to get votes, and then when the rubber hits the road, when lobbyists come upon him, she experienced it differently. She should have done something else. That is garbage and disgusting, and he needs to be held in front of that committee to be accountable for that. Because you don't get to stand up and say you're a feminist and then do that to a woman. You just don't. He's also kept her silent. He's kept her on a muzzle and a leash while he goes out and spins this story. And that's disgusting. That's wrong. He needs to be held to account for that. And finally, as a Calgary MP, deferred prosecution agreements, you're not supposed to consider economic arguments. And then the clerk of the Privy Council gets in front of the Justice Committee and goes, I told the former Attorney General it's about the economic argument. A lot of jobs were at stake. You know what? Maybe the company shouldn't have bribed Libyan officials to begin with, shouldn't have bribed people for contracts. Maybe there should be a cost to doing that. Because you know what? The people in my riding, where's the economic considerations for all of the punitive policies they've put against Alberta energy companies? My riding is looking at this and going, why does Montreal get deferred prosecution agreements? And as we found out today, the government's considering changing the rules so even if they are convicted, that they can still bid on federal contracts. Why are those jobs better than my jobs? The role of a Prime Minister is to unite our country. All jobs are important. You should stand for justice. This is disgusting. This is what every single one of us in this place should be standing against, regardless of political stripe. And Mr. Speaker, to every person standing on that backbench, you are not here for yourself. They're not there for themselves. They're there to stand up for justice and their community. And their role is to hold the government to account, even if that government is of the same partisan stripe as they are. This is where the rubber hits the road. This is where you stand for what's right, or you stand for nothing at all. The Prime Minister was wrong. They should be giving him no quarter, and he should be standing in front of that committee and have to answer for the fact that he's put words in a strong woman's mouth, that he said that one set of jobs is better than another job, that he stands accused of obstruction of justice. Everybody in this country, regardless of how we vote, stand for one thing, and that is the independence of our judiciary, the fact that our country can stand tall and proud and say, we don't do business the same way that other countries do. And that starts today with the leader of our country. He needs to be in front of this committee, and he needs to be held to account. Every person who votes against this is standing and giving him a shield for this type of abrogation of democracy. Every person who votes against this motion should be held to account by the people in their communities who don't want to be divided on this type of garbage. This is the stuff that divides our country. And when at the highest level of government, Mr. Speaker, the leader of our country stands up, fake feminist, standing for jobs with a company that's it's accused of bribing Libyans. Come on. We've got to get our act together, and it starts with the Prime Minister.